The wind tore through the jagged peaks of the moon like a furious beast, rattling the wreckage with a relentless fury that made even the stars shiver. Beneath the shattered hulls of two starships, one human and one alien, the cold seeped in, clutching at the skin like icy fingers determined to claim their prey. She stood motionless, the pale light from the fractured sky casting long shadows across her face. Her ears, long and graceful as ancient blades, twitched against the frigid air. Her breath came in shallow clouds, brittle and fleeting. Pride kept her from admitting that she was beginning to shiver, though every muscle clenched against the cold threatened to betray her. He watched her from behind the remnants of a fallen antenna, arms crossed and teeth clenched against a grimace that tried and failed to look intimidating. The frost had painted his cheeks in white streaks, and the bulk of his thermal jacket did little against the merciless bite of this forsaken satellite. His fingers fumbled with a comm unit, broken beyond repair, but it was the cold that gnawed at him most. "You'd think," he muttered, voice rough like gravel sliding down a canyon, "that the galaxy's deadliest queen would have a better survival plan than crash landing on a frozen rock." She turned toward him, eyes dark pools reflecting the shattered stars above, and raised an eyebrow. "And you'd think a human soldier would have better manners than grumbling at a woman who could vaporize your entire fleet." He smirked despite himself. "Maybe, but you've got me out here freezing my toes off. That's got to count for something, right?" She gave a reluctant chuckle that was more breath than sound. "You think this is freezing? You should try surviving a diplomatic summit on Varelia during the methane storms." "Sounds like a blast," he said dryly. "I'll stick to snow and frozen death, thanks." They both knew the absurdity of their situation. Two supposed enemies stranded miles from anywhere, surrounded by nothing but ice and silence. The silence, in fact, was worse than the cold. It pressed against them, thick and oppressive, like an invisible jury watching their every move. Neither wanted to break it first. Pride was a luxury neither could afford, but stubbornness clung like frostbite to their spirits. He shifted on his feet, the crunch of ice loud in the stillness. "Look, Queenie, if you start turning into a popsicle, I'm not going to just stand here and watch. I've got a jacket. It's not made of starlight or ancient Varelian silk, but it'll keep you from looking like a statue." Her eyes narrowed with mock suspicion. "You want to share your human fabric? What is this? Some kind of galactic peace treaty?" He shrugged, stepping out from the antenna's shadow. "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't want to be the guy who lets the enemy freeze to death. Could get complicated in the reports." For a moment she hesitated, her pride battling the gnawing cold that sapped her strength. Then with a sigh that sounded almost like surrender, she allowed him to drape the bulky jacket over her shoulders. It swallowed her frame, a fortress of warmth against the creeping ice. The fabric smelled faintly of gun oil and burnt toast, but it was better than the bitter kiss of the wind. "You're lucky this jacket's big," she said with a crooked smile. "Otherwise, I might suspect you're trying to smother me." He grinned. "Smothering's a bit dramatic, don't you think? Besides, I'd have to get close enough to do that, and I'm not risking frostbite for a queen's wrath." She chuckled, the sound like a crack in the frozen silence. It was surprising how quickly their antagonism began to thaw, replaced by a fragile camaraderie forged in the cold. He offered a hand, rough and calloused, and she took it, not as a prisoner, but as someone who understood the value of warmth. They set to work salvaging what they could from the wreckage, trading sarcastic remarks between shivering hands and aching limbs. "You know," Elias said, holding up a charred circuit board, "if your fleet's idea of advanced tech is frying itself every time it hits a planet's atmosphere, no wonder you ended up here." Serenia shot him a glare that would have melted lesser men. "At least my ships don't run on hot air and bad coffee." He laughed, the sound echoing weirdly in the frozen expanse. "Hey, don't knock bad coffee. It's the fuel that keeps the galaxy moving." Their banter was a shield against the creeping despair, a bridge between two worlds that seemed so far apart, yet were bound by the same desperate need to survive. As the hours dragged on, the wind's howl softened to a mournful whisper, and the stars blinked with cold indifference. At one point, Elias pulled a half-melted ration bar from his pack and waved it like a trophy. "Dinner is served. Gourmet ice mush with a hint of regret." Serenia eyed it suspiciously. "Is that edible?" "Depends how hungry you are," he replied with a grin. or how desperate. She took a small bite, grimacing as the flavorless texture dissolved on her tongue. I suppose this is what they mean by survival of the fittest? He nudged her with an elbow. More like survival of the sarcastic. Night crept over the moon with a bitter bite that even the jacket struggled to repel. Their breaths came slower now, mingling in the thin air as they sat side by side, silent but not alone. For all their differences, alien queen, human soldier, the cold had humbled them both. And in that shared vulnerability, trust began to root. Elias broke the silence, voice low and almost conspiratorial. You know, if we make it out of here, you owe me more than a jacket. Maybe a medal or at least a decent cup of coffee. Serenia smiled, the faintest curve of lips betraying a warmth deeper than any fabric. And if we don't? He looked at her, eyes sharp despite the weariness. Then I guess we'll just haunt this frozen moon together. I'll bring the bad coffee. She laughed, a sound that seemed to push back the cold, even if just for a moment. Two enemies, stranded and shivering, had found something neither expected, a flicker of warmth in the endless frost. The days on the frozen moon stretched out in a slow, monotonous crawl, like the endless drip of a leaky valve in the bowels of a starship. Time became a slippery concept, slithering between moments of bitter cold and fleeting warmth, as if the universe itself had pressed pause and forgotten to hit play again. Yet in this vast expanse of ice and silence, two unlikely companions found the space to unravel and rebuild the stories they'd carried across galaxies. Serenia, still swathed in the oversized human jacket that had become her armor against the cold, sat beside Elias on a slab of fractured ice that doubled as their makeshift camp. She was fiddling with a small, sleek device that had survived the crash, a relic of her homeworld's advanced technology that could still emit weak pulses of energy, like a dying heartbeat. Elias watched, curious despite himself. So that thing's supposed to fix our comms, right? He asked, rubbing the frost from his fingertips. Because if it doesn't, I'm going to have to start sending smoke signals, and I'm not sure the Varelians have the right kind of antenna for that. Serenia gave a dry laugh, her breath curling like a soft mist. Smoke signals? From you, I'd expect fireworks or something equally reckless. He grinned. I'm full of surprises. Mostly bad ones, but surprises nonetheless. She tilted her head, her long ears catching the weak pulse of the device like antennae to a faint song. This device is more than a comm link. It's a beacon, a call to any nearby allies, or enemies. Her gaze flicked to the distant horizon where shadows played tricks on frozen ridges. Elias narrowed his eyes. Enemies? Great, because what we need here is a galactic party crashing our ice festival. You're optimistic, she teased, though the weight of their predicament tightened her throat. The two sat in companionable silence, the only sounds the gentle crackle of the device and the distant whistle of the moon's relentless winds. Elias broke the quiet, voice laced with a teasing edge. You ever think about how ridiculous it is? Two sworn enemies, stranded on a frozen rock, bonding over bad jokes and nearly inedible ration bars. Serenia raised an eyebrow. You mean I'm not the only one who finds this ridiculous? He shook his head with a grin. Nope, though I have to admit, your brand of sarcasm is slowly growing on me. It's like an exotic spice, sharp, unexpected, and slightly dangerous. Her laugh was soft, a rare warmth that surprised her as much as it did him. Careful, soldier. Flattery will get you frostbite. The days bled into nights with little distinction, save for the shifting colors of the frozen sky. They scavenged what they could from the wreckage, piecing together remnants of technology that might signal for rescue, or at least keep them alive a little longer. Each attempt was punctuated by their easy banter, a fragile shield against the creeping dread. One evening, as they huddled near a small fire Elias had managed to spark from salvaged components, Serenia looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen before. Vulnerability wrapped in steel. Why did you really give me your jacket that first night? He poked at the fire, sparks flying like tiny stars. Honestly, I figured if you froze to death, I'd be the most hated man in the quadrant. Plus, you look like you were about to turn into a popsicle, and I'm not big on hauntings. She smiled, but there was something deeper in her eyes. I expected cruelty, contempt. Instead, you gave me warmth, not just the jacket. Elias shrugged, trying to hide the sudden tightness in his chest. Look, I'm not some big hero, but maybe even a soldier can see when someone's just alone. Besides, you've got these ears that wiggle when you're nervous. It's kind of endearing. Serenia blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected compliment. My ears? He grinned. Yeah, you're like a cat with a spaceship. I half expect you to start chasing laser pointers. She laughed again, the sound bright against the cold. I might just start charging admission for the show. The fire sputtered, casting dancing shadows that mingled with the flickering light of the beacon device. Their conversations drifted to stories of home, his of dusty earth towns and ridiculous sports like baseball, hers of shimmering Varelian palaces and ruthless political intrigues. Neither story sounded as alien as expected. Both revealed a hunger for connection, for belonging. At one point, Elias gestured to the sky. You ever wonder if someone out there is looking up and thinking, what the hell are those two idiots doing on that frozen rock? Serenia's smile softened. If they are, I hope they bring coffee. Or better yet, a heater. He chuckled. I'm starting to think we make a good team. You with your alien tech, me with my terrible jokes. She glanced at him, long ears twitching as if pondering the thought. A queen and a soldier, stranded on a moon. It sounds like the worst kind of bad novel. He shrugged. Or the start of the best story neither of us saw coming. They sat together as the cold crept closer, wrapped in shared warmth and unlikely friendship. In the void between stars, trust began to seed itself, not in grand gestures or promises, but in the quiet moments where laughter chased away the dark, and two hearts found a rhythm against the endless frost. The ship's arrival was neither grand nor silent, a low thrumming beneath the frozen surface, a crackle of static on the salvage comm unit, and then the distant, hopeful hum of engines cutting through the moon's icy veil. Elias had been scanning the horizon when the faint pulse became undeniable. He glanced at Serenia, who sat nearby, her long ears twitching like antennae catching a message from the stars themselves. Her eyes, once fierce and cold as a sharpened blade, now held something softer, anticipation, tinged with a quiet disbelief. We're not ghosts after all, Elias muttered, his breath forming quicksilver clouds that vanished in the chill. Serenia's gaze didn't waver. Or maybe we were just waiting for the right moment to haunt a rescue team. The humor was their shield, the familiar dance of sarcasm and teasing that had kept despair at bay through the endless cold. Elias stood, brushing snow from his jacket as the shadow of the incoming vessel grew larger, a hulking silhouette against the swirling night. Rescue crews descended quickly, clad in heavy gear, and blinking in disbelief at the sight of the infamous Varelian queen and her human captor sitting side by side, sharing a meal scavenged from the wreckage. Orders came thick and fast. Separate them, interrogate, debrief, reassign. Protocols bent under the weight of political implications. But neither Elias nor Serenia moved far from each other's presence. The line between prisoner and soldier had blurred, melted by frost and laughter, now sealed with something neither dared name. In the sterile confines of the medical bay, Elias found himself staring at the bandages wrapped around his arm and the dull ache of wounds that didn't compare to the ones inside. Serenia's own injuries had been treated, but the armor of royalty was slow to come off. When their eyes met across the room, the years of animosity and suspicion seemed less relevant, replaced by an unspoken understanding. You know, Elias said one evening, voice low as the moonlight filtered through reinforced glass, I never thought the Queen of the Galaxy would be so human. Serenia raised an eyebrow, the ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. I'm a lot of things, soldier. Mostly I'm surprised you're not completely insufferable. He laughed. That's because I've been hanging out with the best company. She shifted, the memory of that first night still fresh, her shivering form wrapped in his jacket, the thin thread of trust weaving between them in the silence. That jacket, she said softly, was more than warmth. It was the first kindness I ever received from a human. And it's not the last, Elias replied, reaching out to brush a stray lock of black hair from her pale face. Maybe we're both better off for it. Politics tried to pull them apart, but something stronger held firm. Serenya's reputation as an untouchable sovereign was shaken, not by force of arms, but by the quiet power of connection. The galaxy buzzed with rumors, the fearsome queen softened by a human soldier's simple act of compassion. For once, legends didn't need fire or blood to be remembered. They were etched in moments of laughter, shared hardship, and the subtle warmth of a borrowed jacket. When the time came to part, it was with no grand declarations or sweeping gestures, only a promise whispered between two souls who had traversed frost and fury together. Serenia boarded a diplomatic shuttle bound for Virelia, Elias watching from the landing pad, the weight of their journey settling like a new constellation in his chest. As the engines roared to life, she leaned from the hatch, her voice carrying across the cold air. "If you ever want to visit a methane storm, you know where to find me." Elias grinned, the cold no longer biting quite so sharply. "Only if you bring better coffee." The shuttle lifted, disappearing into the stars, but the bond forged on that frozen moon remained, a testament to the unexpected bridges that could be built when enemies dared to share their warmth. And somewhere in the vast silence of space, two hearts beat a little closer, warmed not by crowns or conquests, but by the simple truth that even in the coldest places, kindness could survive and thrive.